Rajagopal is the first chairman of Pallium India, an organization formed in 2003 with the intention of relieving serious health related suffering throughout India. In 2018, Dr. Rajagopal was honored with Padma Shri, the third highest civilian award given annually from Republic of India. Walk with the Fairy is a compilation of shared experiences from his years of palliative care journey, walking along the road of illness with people suffering from life limiting illnesses, and lesson learned from those who allowed him into their last days on how to befriend life until the very end with compassionate care on one side. He has showcasing love, faith, hope, and grief while navigating the world of illness. This book will provide some insights and a possibility to intercept about one's own lives or roles in the lives of others who are struggling to deal with health challenges. Dr. Richard Smith, former editor of British Medical Journal, said in his review that this book is readable, insightful, and at times funny, a severe critique of modern healthcare and a prescription of transformation. Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, former Deputy Director of Programs in WHO, says this book should be in the medical and nursing curriculum. Written with honesty, empathy, insight, and based on his life's experiences, Dr. M.R. Rajagopal reminds us our first duty to patients is to relieve suffering, and how often we forget that. Today, we have with us one of India's most prominent politicians, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, sharing his thought on the book. Dr. Tharoor was a former international civil servant, diplomat, bureaucrat, writer, and public intellect. He is currently the Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, representing the Thiruvananthapuram constituency. He was formerly an Under Secretary General of the United Nations. A Sahitya Academy Award winner, Mr. Tharoor himself has authored many works of fiction and non-fiction since 1981. Now we welcome you all to Dr. Shashi Tharoor's words about Walk with the Very.
Very good to be with all of you today, especially, of course, Dr. Rajagopal, whom we're here to honor for this remarkable book. I have to say that this has been an event I was very keen on being able to do. I met Dr. Rajagopal in my very first few months as Member of Parliament here when he took the trouble to reach out to me. And to my shame, I have to admit, I had never heard of Pallium India before that. But he persuaded me in his usual compelling way of the extraordinary importance of palliative care. And I became a convert and subsequently was able to work with the RCC and others to promote the idea of palliative care across India. I've raised a couple of questions in Parliament about it, and I have tried to promote the awareness of the fact that this is so indispensable, particularly for people suffering from incurable illnesses. There's this wonderful wonderful line that the RCC came up with. I'd gone to speak there on palliative care at one point, and I was struck by the fact that there was a well-known expression that many doctors practice that says that the objective of medical care is to cure sometimes, to relieve often, and to comfort always. But in fact, people have not been able to do that. And as Dr. Rajagopal describes in the most interesting way, from his young days as a doctor, thrust unwillingly into the field of anesthesiology, which was the one field he didn't want to get, but he was thrust into that against his wishes. And what he discovered, of course, was how deficient we are in our country on issues of pain management. And he talks about his own learnings, how he had wonderful stories, one after the other. The anecdotes in this book are so readable, telling us about how his eyes were opened, his learnings from each experience, both good and bad. And then, of course, his advanced training at Oxford in the early 90s, when you realize that some of the things that he was intuitively coming up with were established practices amongst people of some experience in the UK. And with that extra training, he was able to come back and do so much more to help people. I mean, there's no question that we all have to die one day, but that some people's deaths are more agonizing and sometimes unnecessarily so than they need to be. One of the things that I think all of us as human beings are conscious of is that the way people die lives on in the minds of those who are left behind. And watching people suffer is a searing experience. I've had many, I mean, as an MP, as you know, especially in Kerala, one is frequently called upon to visit bereaved homes. And one of the recurring comments one hears is how relieved people were when their loved one passed away because the suffering would no longer have to be borne. But Dr. Rajagopal and his work have given us the idea that you don't actually need to suffer. That cliche that it's not the days in your life that matters, but the life in your days is actually a very, very valid thought, because if the quality of each day can be made more bearable by the easing of pain and suffering, then you're doing something to actually make things so much better, both for the person who is suffering and who is heading towards an inevitable end, and those around him or her, the family, who would have to live with the memory of those last days. A patient who is relatively pain-free, if not entirely pain-free, and is able, therefore, to leave this world with peace and dignity. Such a person leaves behind, in all of us, happier memories than one who is suffering torment before going. I want to say a brief word about the writing of this book. It really is an exceptionally readable book. I know that there are many doctors in our country who publish memoirs, which frankly they think ought to be of interest because they know their lives were interesting, but which through their writing they have not been able to make interesting. And as a result, they largely are released and end up being unread. This is a book that deserves to be read and deserves to be read widely. It's written with a wonderfully engaging style. His modesty and humility are always there. And I think Dr. Chandrika will be particularly amused by the passages relating to how attractive or not he was as a potential suitor early on. But the fact is that, that he tells stories in a way that makes the story come to life. The language is very lucid, very simple, very clear. And as a result, the book just transports you along. And through his eyes, you see issues of great importance and complexity in a very understandable way. I must say that I wish you had told me earlier, Dr. Rajagopal, that you were looking for a publisher, because rather than go to the kind of house you have gone to, I would rather have had you been recommended to a mainstream publisher, because this is a book that deserves wide distribution and wide readership. It's really important, I think, to appreciate the quality of the writing, because too often the importance of the subject matter is all that we are conscious of, and we forget the fact that if a story has to be told, it must be told well. And Dr. Rajagopal, who is, I'm delighted to discover, like me, a P.G. Wodehouse fan, knows the importance of keeping the reader interested and entertained as his story evolves. So I do want once again to congratulate Dr. Rajagopal. I was going to refer to this, this clever acronym that the RCC came up with. I told them to stop doing it because they were going to deprive themselves of sponsorship from Coca-Cola, because it's an acronym called PEPSI, which I'm sure some of you in this field have already heard, which is that you must heal pain, that's the P, while dealing with emotional issues, that's the E, psychosocial issues, that's the second P, spiritual concerns, and that's not just of the patient, but also of the family, and interpersonal relationships between the dying and the living. And I thought that actually was a very clever way of looking at the range of challenges that a care provider has to contend with. If you can reduce it to a Pepsi, that is a way of remembering that it is not just pain you are managing, which of course is extremely important, but along with pain, the process of dying involves all these other elements as well: emotional, psychosocial, spiritual, and interpersonal, which ultimately will have a terribly important bearing on the life, the way in which the patient exits his or her life. I told them slightly jokingly, don't use this because you won't get sponsorship from Coca-Cola, but I don't think they have sponsorship from either Coca-Cola or Pepsi anyway at the RCC. But I do believe that the fact that a major cancer institute like that has been persuaded to take up palliative care as a very major option and as a very major requirement is also a good sign. A final word of tribute to Dr. Rajagopal. Apart from being a fine writer, he's built up a very important institution, and he has spoken consistently and with commitment for a cause which was an orphaned cause at one time and is now achieving mainstream acceptance. Certainly, when I raised the issue in Parliament, nobody in the health ministry was going to be negative about it. They were quite accepting of the importance. We need, of course, to widen the reach and impact of awareness of palliative care and the resources required to deliver it. I mean, you need not only painkillers and pain medicine and facilities, hospitals, research, extension workers. And I know that for Dr. Rajagopal, he's had to work very hard and struggle to be able to find enough resources to do his own work and build up his own institution. This is something too that I hope the government, both state and central, will take more seriously and commit more resources to, because ultimately this is going to be the way in which the living remember the loss of their loved ones with or without pain. So let me once again thank Dr. Rajagopal for his book, for his years of service to society, for his amazing contributions in this field and in building up an institution which certainly has brought mercy to thousands of people. And I hope eventually through the spreading of the word will actually help not thousands, but lakhs and lakhs to leave this world with dignity, grace, and peace. Thank you all very much. And once again, I wish the book all success. Congratulations.
After those kind words from Dr. Shashi Tharoor, now we move on to the reading of the book. Today we have with us Dr. Deepak Sudhakaran, who is presently heading the Social and Community Engagement Departments of Pallium India with us to take us through one chapter of the book. Dr. Deepak is having 3 years of field experience in community-based primary health and palliative care interventions in Karnataka with Manipal University. He also provided voluntary 1 year of field-based palliative care and social outreach services for rural and tribal welfare in rural Tamil Nadu with Isha Foundation. His areas of interest include health systems development, primary health care, and community-based palliative medicine. Dr. Deepak, it is indeed our pleasure to have you with us on this wonderful evening. It is over to you.
Thank you so much, Shri Priya. Very good evening to one and all, respected Rajagopal sir and all the others who have joined us today evening. So the chapter which I have chosen to read out is chapter 5, which is Screams That Stayed With Me. It is a chapter, I mean, it's a part of sir's life from his younger days. He's still very young at heart, I know that, and much more active than many of the young people I know. But this is from his earlier days, chronologically. So I'll start off. I would wake up at 4:30 a.m. every morning and negotiate a tricky terrain from my home to board a bus at 5:45 a.m. It used to take me nearly an hour and a half to reach medical college after boarding another bus at the heart of Trivandrum city. It would be nearly 7 p.m. when I returned home in the evening, having endured the jostling crowds in the bus. I used to be so tired that I would doze off even as I pored over my medical books. And just as I was dropping off to sleep, the screams would begin. In the silence of the night, it would pierce through every heart in an otherwise silent village neighborhood. He was a distant cousin who lived about 100 meters away from my house. He had an unusual cancer of the sweat glands and tumors on his scalp. This gave him a lot of pain. He said it was as though someone was drilling through his skull. Even in the mid-1960s, he had received chemotherapy. And as happens even now, he did not get any pain relief. When the family had asked the doctor if they could give him something to relieve the pain, they met with looks of disbelief. How can you expect cancer to be pain free? The idea of easing the agonizing pain of a cancer patient was alien to doctors at that time. It was only in 1967 that a British nurse turned physician, Cicely Saunders, opened St. Christopher's Hospice, the first modern hospice in London. She was the one who would introduce effective pain management and insist that dying people deserve dignity, compassion, and respect. I visited my ailing cousin just once when I was in my first year at medical college. The family knew I was a medical student and wondered if I could help. They asked me if I could do something to ease his pain, but I could do nothing. I shook my head, mumbled something meaningless, and walked away. I never visited him again until his death. I carry that guilt to this day. I could not relieve his pain, but at least I could have held his hand and sat near him for a few minutes. We were never close, but he was my cousin. Why did I never visit him again? Today, in retrospect, I know why I never visited him again. It was fear. I was afraid of my helplessness, and that made me stay away. It hurts even today to think about him. Majority of medical students learned to build a wall of indifference to suffering and pain in the first year of clinical studies itself. It was a calculated indifference we developed when we were confronted with human agony. It was rare for a student to stop and help a patient in suffering. Only an odd student might actually buy a meal for a starving patient deserted by his family. The norm was to turn the other way. It is a sad truth that even today there is so much needless suffering in our hospitals that overwhelm the staff, including doctors. Most of us, as medical students, learn from our teachers and seniors to develop a protective veneer of studied insensitivity. Nobody articulates it in so many words, but the lesson passed on to us is that our job is to diagnose and to cure. We have nothing to do with human suffering. Suffering is inevitable. We better learn to take it philosophically. As for me, though my cousin's screams would come back to haunt and change the course of my life. That brings us to the end of the chapter. This chapter probably opens doors for a non-medical person to understand how a medical student, is taught to, or maybe gets exposed to different situations, because of which this learned indifference becomes a part of our practice. And of course, we want to move on to our next patient. And for a doctor, it gives us food for thought that is there something else which we can do. As a reflection of this chapter, I also would like to bring in a personal life situation which had occurred to me when I was in second year of medical school and clinical exposure had just begun. In the medicine ward, general medicine ward, we had a patient admitted. She was the second patient I had seen as a medical student in my life. And she was a 27-year-old with systemic lupus erythematosus. For doctors, you must be already knowing that this is a disease which affects has so many different manifestations. And she was admitted in the ward for an MRI scan for which she didn't have money. She had severe pain of her left hip. And we as medical students who are just learning to take history of a patient, to ask what are your complaints and to ask history. We were in that phase of learning and she just started opening up. And I remember putting my head down on the railing of the bed on which she was lying down and crying. Because here was a person who didn't have money to take an MRI scan and her doctor had told her that without that scan, we can't proceed with treatment. I went back to the students' room where all the students were sitting, and I said that, with tears in my eyes, that there is something like this. We have to do something. Let's collect money. And within one day, few of us got together, collected 4,000 rupees, and gave it to her. She was very happy. I developed a long relationship with her after that, until my internship days, when she started calling me to ask for more money. And I realized that how often or how frequently can I keep doing this is a question I asked myself at that point in time. And I'm sure many doctors would be in that position where many of our patients require a lot of help, but we may be thinking, how much can I do? I can pay for one patient, two patients, three patients. And after that, how much more can I keep giving? I can only say that I'm glad that I was able to find my calling in life. Right now, I'm part of Pallium, part of a system which was under the visionary leadership of Rajagopal sir, where if I want to do something for somebody who is in health related suffering, I have so many volunteers whom I can discuss this with, and they will find out ways of raising funds or cash or in kind to do what is required for that person who is in suffering. And that reinstates my belief that we need to have strong community based networks of support for anybody who is in health related suffering. With that, I would close this small few minutes which was given to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deepak. It was really heart touching when you shared your own experience connected with the particular chapter. Today we have joining with us Dr. Parth Sharma, who is a public health physician, researcher, writer, and founder of Nivarana, a public health information and advocacy platform. He is interested in preventive oncology and palliative care and is collaborating with Pallium India on research projects related to the public health aspect of palliative care in India. He graduated from CMC Vellore in 2020 and is currently doing MD in community medicine from MAMC Delhi. Now I would request Dr. Parth to share a review about the book Walk with the Weary. Dr. Parth, it is over to you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. I feel very honored to get this opportunity to share my experience after reading this book. And thanks to Deepak for giving me this opportunity. Very warm good evening to all, and especially Rajagopal sir. He has been my role model for a very long time. And to share my thoughts on the book today, I feel it's a great honor for me. I have worked in oncology as a part of my bond. I have worked in emergency, and I badly wish that I wish I had this book before I started seeing suffering. In the past 3-4 years of my limited clinical practice, I feel I have seen a lot of suffering, and I wish if I had read this book before, I could have handled all that suffering better. It would have been better for me. It would have been better for my patients. There are a few messages which come from this book which are very strong, and I feel the main one is importance of pain and how to manage it. But there are a lot of other messages which I personally felt were something very new for me. I have been struggling to deal with suffering of others, and to read Dr. Rajagopal write about it, that how he himself went through that, of how he felt helpless during his days. It made me realize that I'm not feeling something very strange. It was initially when I started working, I wanted to become a doctor because my aim in life was to help people. When I save lives was my initial goal. When I started working in oncology, I realized I can't even save everybody. And so my aim changed to helping everybody. Then I came to emergency for a year and I realized I can't even help everybody. There is only very limited things I can do. And then I read the book, and even Dr. Rajagopal sir writes about it, how there's only limited things we can do for others. Even we can't help everybody to the fullest that we would want us to help them, but there's only limited things we can do. And it was always told to me that empathy cannot be taught. It has to be either you get it from your family or you observe your seniors and learn empathy. But I feel we finally have a book which, if all medical students, if all medical practitioners, if they read it, and I'm sure they'll learn a lot about empathy just by reading this book. And if I were to summarize the messages that I have sort of learned from this book, one is definitely importance of pain management, and I definitely now take pain very seriously. Whoever comes to me in even the smallest amount of pain, I take it very seriously. The struggles of doing unconventional things, uh, palliative care from being non-existent in India to being where it is today, the difficulties Sir faced. That's something a very important message that I learned from this. Importance of support, not just from your family, but also from total strangers, which takes you the distance. You can't do everything alone. You need people by your side. And most importantly, being a human first and a doctor later. And this is something I feel is very well conveyed in this book. And this I would like to end with a quote, which is from my mentor, Dr. John Cherry Newman, which I feel is sums up the entire story of this book. And he told me one day when I was going through this struggle of dealing with other people's suffering, he told me our calling is not to change the world. Suffering was there before we came. Suffering will continue to exist after we are gone. Our calling is to share the pain. And I feel this is a message that Dr. Rajagopal has beautifully conveyed in his book. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parth, for your time and those very intelligent words. Now we have the author himself, Dr. M.R. Rajagopal, the Chairman Emeritus of Pallium India and author of the book, joined us in this wonderful evening to say a few kind words with us. Sir, it is over to you.
Sri, thank you. And Deepak and Parth. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for putting those words, chosen careful words, so lucidly. We heard from Deepak about empathy and activism. As a young doctor or as a medical student, that was not clear to me. He became an activist to help a patient. I confess that I did not have that integrity and courage. It's courage. It's courage that's required to do something that everybody is not doing. Every one of us, almost every one of us, came into medical school with compassion in the heart. None of us wanted to hurt patients or harm patients. But I was reading this book, Dignity in Care, by, see who it is? Harvey Chocino, the founder of Dignity Therapy. Harvey Chocino, the Canadian psychiatrist. The message that he conveys, not only in this book, is this. We have to get to know the person. And Anatole Broyard, a former editor of the New York Times, actually has written about this, and I have quoted him. He says, in learning to talk to his patients, the doctor may talk himself back into loving his work or her work. All of us, when we learn to talk to patients, we start learning to love our work. If we do, okay, he says, the patients can share, as few others can, the wonder, the terror, and the exaltation of being on the edge of being between the natural and supernatural. All our education did not permit us to see that. See being at the edge between life and death. And learning from that is very enriching. As he said, we all came into this with compassion in our hearts. And Chochinov again re-emphasizes it. What happens exactly? It is, I earlier, you read about the veneer of studied indifference. That is something that we learn by watching our seniors. Every doctor, most of our teachers were afraid. They were afraid to look at suffering, and they walked away from suffering. And we learned that without anybody telling us in so many words, that if you want to survive, we have to turn away from suffering. That was a sad lesson to learn. And what palliative care did to me was to give me the courage to look at it, to look the patient in the eye, sit beside him or her, hold their hands, and convey, I care for you. That's what took me courage. I'm glad palliative care gave me that courage. Till then, I was afraid. So friends, I'm so glad that you're all here and listening. Oh my God, 120 people, so heartening. Thank you. And from other countries also, I see Mabashir from Lesotho, Africa. Maybe others also. So thank you all for being here. And I'm glad you're all in this profession. People who come into palliative care are a special breed. And thank you for the compassion. And someday, when my time comes, I hope one of you will look after me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajagopal, for the wonderful words and especially for that wonderful work you wrote. So I think it's time for question and answers. So since we have many people, you can type your questions in the chat option, or you can raise your hands. Any questions to sir? Yes, Pratibha. You can unmute now and speak. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Rajgopal. At the onset, I want to tell you that I had zero knowledge about palliative care. I wouldn't say zero, but what everybody knows about palliative care is about, it is catered to those people who are at the end of their life. And your book was certainly certainly an eye-opener for me, where I realized that palliative care was so much more than just caring for a person. It was also caring for the family, providing so much of support. I think, your book has answered a lot of questions, and I picked it up about a couple of months ago. And I would say that reading it has given me the outlook of palliative care as to, I would have never understood it. So I would really like to thank you for that, writing such a wonderful book. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for reaching out to so many people and explaining to them in such simple words what palliative care is all about. I hope to interact with you one day and get my book signed by you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Pradeepa. I certainly hope we can meet up and over a cup of tea talk.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Raju, are you going to deal with the chat box or Deepa?
Yes, sir. It's all good messages for you, sir. And like Dr. Atul was asking, can you name the book just mentioned on dignity therapy? Can you mention it again, sir?
I mean, he has written several books, many well-known books. But what I showed you is one called Dignity in Care. It's recent, very new book. Can I give you the bad news? There is no Indian edition. Fearfully expensive. It is something like 7,500 rupees. I am glad I got one free from him. I am grateful to him. And it is not a book to read. It's a book to study. Raju,
Yes, sir.
I thought I saw some question to be answered. Uh,
So we have Dr. Chidananda raising his hands. Dr. Chidananda, over to you. And then we will take questions from the chat.
okay, okay.
So good evening, sir. It's very
Hi.
nice to interact with you again.
Good evening, Dr. Chidananda.
Very nice to interact with you again. I've gone through got your book at Coimbatore during the Ganga meeting, and it's very what you call it. It gives a different thought process to the whole concept of patient care, palliative care, irrespective of whatever some specialty we are taking. I think it's really eye opener to all of us, where we need to be emphasizing the things on, especially patients who are in terminally ill or whatever it is. At least in my area where I am dealing with in neurocritical care, that is the families and all. When we discuss with the families, this definitely it has changed a lot of my thought process and my interaction with the families when I interact with them. And also, I would like to thank you for guiding me through I finished both the foundation course and the essentials of palliative care. One is where we go through the fixed schedule program, and then which is where which we have a where we have at our own pace we can complete the program. In fact, I joined both of them and I completed both of them recently, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Chidananda.
I think
And
I'm looking forward to taking this more in fact, as during one of the classes, I think in end of life care, Dr. Gushani, he talked about end of life care and all. And since he is also this thing, I want to take it forward in palliative care, sir. That's
very
what
good.
is my lookout now, sir.
Very good. Very
And
good.
blessings and guidance, definitely. I hope I should be able to do it.
Thank you. As Dr. Chidananda mentioned, neurology in India is one group that has taken palliative care seriously. Neuropalliative care courses, many have been conducted. They have been conducted in Bengaluru, Kerala, in Kochi, in New Delhi, and so many places, and many people have been trained. So I would, in partial answer to Dr. Chidananda, I would suggest you looking up, I mean, for anybody working in critical care in the audience, look up the guidelines of Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine. Deepak or Raju, and somebody please put it up on the chat box. Guidelines, end of life care guidelines of Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine, ISCCM, or the Blue Maple document from Manipal Hospital. Maybe after I have answered this question, I can put it down on the chat box if Raju did not get it. So the guidelines are there, but Dr. Chidananda, unless you have palliative care, practicing that is a bit difficult. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Definitely, I've gone through actually this end of life care, DNA, CPR, and all those things were the ICMR guidelines and all. Especially last year when I was doing my the postgraduate diploma in health medical legal this thing from National Law School. I was preparing because one of the topic which I had written up about was organ donation after cardiac death. During that time, I had read all these things, even the guidelines by what's it the which is still pending in the parliament, I think. About this end of life care, advanced care guidelines, and all those things. So. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. In 2016, Government of India actually posted a draft end of life care law on the website and asked for public comments. More than 1,500 comments were received from the public. Maybe that's the reason nothing happened. They did not proceed with it,
Yes,
at least at that parliament session. And when a government changes at the end of 5 years, even if it's the same party, all pending legislation becomes invalid. So at the moment, there is nothing happening there. Thank you, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you, Dr.
Um,
Siddhananda. So we have a couple of questions regarding raising funds about the training and all. I think we personally will get touch with those doctors.
Okay.
And you have an interesting question, sir. How to manage time to dedicate to palliation? Your views on that, sir.
Uh,
How to manage time to
I
dedicate
know,
to
I know. I was actually thinking of a busy doctor in the month of June in Kerala during the monsoons, when all those viral fevers and gastroenteritis and everything is so wide. And an average doctor in a primary health center may be seeing as many as 150 patients a day. So how much of attention can she or he give to a single patient? So is it all impractical? I don't think so. It's a matter of equity, filling in care into the time we have, however little that is, or however more that is. Say, for example, if it is somebody coming with a viral fever and you are exhausted, that's the 133rd patient that you are seeing. But still, if you will force yourself to smile, I think you will be okay in 3 days. Take this medicine. And if you are smiling and your eyes convey that you care for the person, you have integrated palliative care. If a teenager is coming to you with a running nose and sneezing 17 times, if in addition to prescribing some medication, you ask, you look anxious, are you very scared? And the person may say, it is today I have my exam. And then instead of giving her an antihistaminic that will sedate her, you will give her something that something like fexofenadine. And when you have done that, when you have understood that little bit and given fexofenadine, a non-sedative antihistaminic, you have incorporated palliative care there. But having said all that, among the 137 people that you see, I may see that in 1 or 2 faces, the weight of the world is resting on those faces. They look particularly sad or anxious. And I may say, do you need to talk? I'm sorry that I cannot talk now, but can you come back at 3 p.m.? We'll find some time. So maybe in the whole time I have, I'll ensure that care is equitable. Somebody who needs care more gets better care. And that has been taught to me by patients so many times. Once I saw with a young man in agony from cancer pain, his young wife who looked like a teenager but was already a mother, standing like a statue. That was so odd. You don't expect a wife to be so emotionless. So I asked at that time my colleague Ajita to take her aside and talk to her. And what that conversation brought out was a suicide pact. They had entered into an agreement that when he dies, she will kill poison to her child and kill herself. Now, if that emotionless face was not picked up, I don't know what the consequence would have been. So it's about using the time you have with as little care as possible. And I'll admit, at the end of a tiring day, my action includes less and less empathy. If I am extremely exhausted, I know, but that's okay too. Everybody, Dr. Nikhil, Dr. Rita, Dr. Maria, you are not God Almighty. I am not God Almighty. It's okay to be human. It's okay to do your best and go to bed with the feeling that I've done our best. Arising from that, there's a question from Navish, Raju. Navish is asking, is it okay to cry? Is it okay to cry? Well, I would not like to cry in front of the patient. I would like to be calm and be there for the person. But I also know that sometimes my eyes fill. Sometimes my eyes fill. I wish it didn't, but Navish, I am not ashamed of it. And that is so many times better than having that rigid face and expressionless action. But having said that, we have to learn not the therapeutic distance of a kilometer long, but we have to keep remind ourselves that we cannot solve all our problems, all problems. And it's easy to say, don't take the problems home. But if the problem seems to be too heavy for me, Navish, I'll seek a member of the team who is prepared to listen. I'll catch hold of Deepak or Raju. Hey, come and give me 10 minutes, please. I want to tell you something. And I'm sure if they can, they will. And sharing is another way in which we overcome that grief up to a point.
Thank you, sir. That totally echo with the last question also. Most of the time, we are not able to help patients even being in the system.
So how can we handle that regret? So when we have done what we can, I don't know how you will deal with it. I'll tell you what I do. One, I'll share with others. Say, I'm feeling miserable about this. And second thing is, I have to recognize that as a healthcare professional, there's a limit to what I can do. I had once seen this man with advanced cancer and pain sitting up during the monsoon, holding an umbrella inside his home because his roof was leaking. It had not been thatched because he did not have the money. What would I do? I had to walk away. I mean, I had to give him pain relief and walk away that day. But you know what our colleagues did? One of our social workers and 3 volunteers went that Saturday and pulled a tarpaulin over the roof and tied it up. You and I have very many limitations. And if, like Deepak raised that 4,000 rupees, if we just engage more with the community, maybe you will be able to talk to your cousin's friend who is a Rotarian and see if they can help. And as we engage with the community more solutions will appear. How Parth is asking, how do we stay sensitive to all the suffering and not become immune to it? Parth, I was totally immune, or I thought so, as a medical student. That was what I had learned. The way to protect myself was to be immune, build a wall around me. But then I found that I don't have to be immune. I can instead practice empathy in action. And whatever suffering I could relieve, I would relieve. And when that success happens, when I saw the picture of that tarpaulin sheet going over the roof, I felt my life more meaningful. I felt such an enormous respect and pride for my colleagues who made it happen and for the volunteers. So you don't become immune to it when you seek solutions and solve some other problems. And then look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, you have done your best. You're not God Almighty. Now go to bed. We are that in a way getting immune to those parts of suffering where we cannot help. But the thought that we are able to relieve much of the suffering is intoxicating, giving so much of meaning in there. Yadav, it is very difficult to be totally indifferent. Being affected is not an excuse not to practice palliative medicine. Thank you, Yadav. Some people, as I did, Yadav, as a medical student, learned and practiced indifference. I'm not proud of it. I'm just confessing that. But that is really cowardice on my part. Now I realize I did not have the courage. We are, hey, abbreviation of a name, very enigmatic. I don't know if in the time given by most physicians to a patient allows that recognition of a hidden emotion, allows deeper connect, allows even most patients to understand they deserve to be heard, to be understood, to be allowed to express beyond the presenting visible complaints. While some may naturally have that empathy, I wish that was also emphasized to us from school age and several times in medical school. It could go a long way. I also wonder what telemedicine is going to do to this gap in hope. We are very odd, not getting your first name, but we are, you wish you had this emphasized to you in medical school. Yes, we did not, but now it has touched you. So you now have the privilege of giving to many people, many medical students, what you yourself did not get. And they'll be so grateful to you. We have to, somebody from Maulana Asad Medical College said how privileged they feel to have palliative care and to teach palliative care. Yes. So I'm sorry that you and I missed this in medical school. But you, though it was not emphasized to you from school age and medical school, you are now in a position to do that to children. I hope, like many of our team members, you, when you have the time, go to schools and colleges and talk to children. It's a very delightful experience how attitudes change. And we are, one more thing, sorry. I don't know if in the time given by most physicians to a patient allows that recognition of a hidden emotion. May not be our. We cannot be perfect. Very often we will not have the time. We will have the sad experience of walking away. But when you have done your best for a few, even that is tremendous. And when 7 young doctors or medical students watch you doing what you do to a few, it is geometric proportion. They are transformed. And that matters. We have 1.4 billion people in our country. We have 7 to 10 million people in serious health-related suffering. Yes, we are today not touching most of them. That's okay. That's all we can do. Try to reach as many and make that visible.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving those words of wisdom and mixed with practicality, as well as pushing us to do a little more than what we practically can. Sir, in the best interest of time, I think we'll take the session towards its end. We have a lot of questions regarding, if there are free books available, where is the book available? Some of them have answered, some of the participants have answered also that this is available on Amazon. I would like everyone to know that every single rupee which is generated by the sales of this book goes towards providing palliative care to an underprivileged family or a beneficiary. Also, many have asked whether how they can get trained under the guidance of Sir or work more towards palliative care. I would like everyone to know that we have many courses, which is virtual as well as residential, for doctors, nurses, social officers, volunteers. We have facilitation teams in different states so that we can facilitate palliative care across the country. This includes the north, east, west, central, and southern India zones. So we have provided our link over here where a lot more information is available. And if any one of you would like to get in touch with us regarding something more specific, please do write to us at info@palliumindia.org. Sir, shall we bring it to a close with that, sir? Would you like to share something before we close?
No, I have a request to Raju. I've said put it on the chat box. Can I have? I know many comments have not been answered, and questions are not being answered. Can you document all the chat messages and send them to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, I
And
will.
possibly to Deepak also. Friends, I shouldn't run over time. Raju is so smiling and nice, but she becomes a horror if I overrun time. She's very strict about it. So, friends, thank you for participating. I was joking. She's not ferocious, but I shouldn't take advantage of that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the kind words.
Thank you so much, sir. So we are seeing around 118 participants today. This is the first webinar of us. And sorry to say that we will not be having continuous webinars like this, but for a different group, yes. So thank you all for your time, staying with us for 1 hour. Thank you, sir, for that wonderful book. And we'll see you with another program of us. Till then, bye. Take care.